John Kane here from Let's Talk Native. Niagara Falls Mayor Paul Dyster appears to have an addiction, a gambling addiction. Well, a gaming revenue addiction. Paul Dyster's abuse and misappropriation of gaming revenue from the Seneca Niagara Casino has left him and the city of Niagara Falls not only critically dependent, but delusional in their insatiable craving for a Seneca gaming fix. After shooting $250 million worth of free money through poor city budgets for 14 years, Mr. Dyster now looks desperate and confused as he and his chief enabling officer in Albany ignore the end of the far too generous sharing from the Seneca Nation and now are resorting to strong-arming them. It's truly a shame that the money intended to bolster an economy was allowed to mask mismanagement and incompetence. The almost $250 million that was shared with Niagara Falls via Albany and the state Seneca Gaming Compact was not supposed to fill potholes, support city salaries, or make the mayor look like a champion of the people by avoiding the much-needed property tax hikes. It was supposed to create revenue, promote economic development, and build the tourism industry that Niagara Falls, New York lost to Niagara Falls, Ontario. And because no investments in the city were made, no meaningful new or increased revenue is coming. Certainly not anytime soon. Instead of engaging in a strategy to revitalize Niagara Falls over the last decade, Mr. Dyster now pins all his hopes on the governor and campaigns for public sympathy for his dependency and his "they owe me" platform. Let's look at the difference in how the Seneca managed gaming revenue versus how Mr. Cuomo and Mr. Dyster did. First, though, let's look more closely at the numbers. The Senecas offered revenue sharing on a sliding scale over 14 years for an exclusivity in the gaming market offered by the state for all of Western New York, extending over 15 counties. That sliding scale started at 18% of the net slot drop for years 1 through 4, 22% for years 5 through 7, and 25% for years 8 through 14. The payout percentages are clearly laid out in the compact and are also clearly listed for only 14 years. But just what does the net slot drop really mean? This is the money dropped into the machines after payouts but before expenses. So out of the revenue that the Senecas kept, 75% in the last 7 years, they covered all of the expenses. They covered the cost of floor space, the machines, the licenses, the utilities, the maintenance, the slot attendants, the free booze, the cocktail waitresses, marketing, the promotion, the management, the security, debt service, legal fees, and all of the other expenses associated with the facility housing these machines. The 25% that went to the state, only a quarter of which came back to Niagara Falls and the other municipalities, had no expenses associated with it. That 25% really represents more like 50% of the actual net revenue of those machines. Neither the state nor Niagara Falls reinvested any of their gaming revenue back into the tourism industry, or in any way supported the Seneca gaming market that they both benefited from. The Senecas, on the other hand, they built out their gaming business, added gaming floor, built new facilities, renovated, added hotel rooms, and generally improved their product, which again, both the state and Niagara Falls benefited from. As that sliding scale increased and the expansion and reinvestment by the Senecas built up their business, so increased the dollars to the state and Niagara Falls. The exclusivity, on the other hand, which is the legal basis for the revenue sharing in the first place, decreased in value, if it really ever had any value in the first place. The compact is clear on its face. What the Senecas would give was abundantly clear. The percentages were set, and the revenue sharing was for 14 years. But what the state gave up for revenue sharing is not so clear. The underlying federal law, the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, IGRA, prohibits taxation of native gaming by states and municipalities. Revenue sharing must be based on a concession by the state that is both substantial and quantifiable. What New York State offered as an exclusivity was not only not substantial, it was a sham. The state was already prohibited by its own law from permitting Vegas-style casino gaming, including the operations of the slot machines that the state received revenue from. So what was the concession? Any gaming the state was allowed to do by their own laws, it indeed did do. And it did it within and in spite of the exclusivity zone. The state built 3 of its failing area horse racing tracks into casinos, filled them with slot machines. Any value the exclusivity claimed to represent on paper when Seneca Gaming began diminished with every machine the state allowed into those racetracks. Even if the machines were technically permitted by the terms of the compact, they clearly violated the spirit and intent of the agreement. And more specifically, reduced the value of the state's concession even as the revenue sharing increased. This is more than just an ethical problem. It's a legal problem. It violates a significant element of the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. The Senecas knew early on that the state was cheating them. A 4-year hold on the release of revenue sharing payments would ultimately end in 2013 by both sides aborting arbitration and the state surrendering over $200 million to the Senecas for their breach. But 2016 would bring about an automatic state Seneca Nation Gaming Compact renewal, provided neither had any objections. For the Senecas, 2016 was a light at the end of the tunnel. The 14-year payment term for revenue sharing would expire and finally come to an end. No other provisions in the previous term seemed problematic enough to object to. And since that one expired, the Senecas didn't. The state saw no objectionable provisions either, so the compact renewed without incident. It's pretty clear that the folks from Albany and Niagara Falls knew the language of the compact included the payments running only through 14 years, but chose not to raise this issue, hoping the Senecas wouldn't notice, that they would just keep paying. Who knows? But one thing was always clear. The Senecas had no intention of continuing to pay another $1 billion for nothing. Mr. Cuomo and his 3 cash-strapped mayors hoped threatening the Senecas with lawsuits and arbitration and stiffer competition from more state-licensed casinos would back them down and convince them to keep paying. The governor knows that he can't win in arbitration, not only because the language is so clear, but because the whole revenue sharing agreement in the first place violates IGRA. Had arbitration been completed in 2013, the revenue sharing would have ended then. The other hammer some believe the governor holds is to void or cancel the compact and shut the Senecas down completely. But the state has no such power. Their claim of broad powers to authorize and regulate gaming in the state ends at the Seneca property lines. Mayor Dyster is just going to have to suffer through his gaming dollar withdrawals, do some budget rehab, and live a more honest and virtuous life. Addiction is a disease, but treatment provides hope. Good luck, sir.